The snipers laughed when the old man stepped forward. And it was not the cool laughter of villains from a storybook, but the casual, careless laughter of professionals who had seen too much and believed there was nothing left to surprise them. He looked wrong for the place, wrong for the moment, wrong for war itself. His back was bent not by injury, but by time, his beard gray and uneven, his coat patched and worn thin at the elbows. In his hands was a rifle that looked like it belonged in a museum or above a fireplace, its metal dulled, its wooden stock scarred by decades of use. Snow fell lightly around them, settling on shoulders and helmets, and the wind cut across the open ground with the kind of cold that seeped into bones. The general stood several steps behind the line, confident and composed, his presence alone enough to command silence, though at this moment he allowed the laughter to continue. The old man said nothing. He simply lowered his head slightly, as if acknowledging not the mockery, but the weight of memory pressing down on him. The snipers, elite soldiers trained to hit targets at distances most people could not even comprehend, whispered among themselves. 2 miles, one of them muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Another smiled and adjusted his scope, more amused than threatened. The general raised a hand and the laughter faded, replaced by a tense quiet. He looked at the old man with curiosity rather than respect, as one might look at a relic pulled from the past and placed awkwardly in the present. The general asked his name, his voice sharp and controlled, carrying easily through the cold air. The old man answered softly, his voice rough but steady, and when he spoke his name, it meant nothing to anyone there. No rank attached to it, no reputation that carried fear. The general asked why he had come, why he carried that rifle, and the old man replied that it was the only thing he had ever truly known how to hold. Some of the soldiers exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh again or remain silent. The general gestured toward the open expanse beyond them, a frozen valley stretching into white haze. He told the old man that the enemy lay far beyond that, farther than any sane man would attempt to shoot, farther than the old rifle could ever reach. The old man nodded as if agreeing, as if the general were stating something obvious. He took a step forward, boots crunching softly in the snow, and raised the rifle just enough for the snipers to see the cracked leather sling and the careful way his fingers wrapped around the grip. His movements were slow, not weak, but deliberate, each action measured as though he were following a ritual ingrained over a lifetime. One of the snipers scoffed and said something about mercy, about ending this farce quickly, but the general held up a hand again. He wanted to see this play out, wanted to confirm his belief that experience without modern training was nothing more than nostalgia. The old man adjusted his stance, feet planted firmly, shoulders squared despite their age, and for a moment, the air seemed to still. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting. He did not look through a high-powered scope, did not adjust any advanced equipment. He simply brought the rifle to his shoulder and gazed down its iron sights, eyes narrowing, breath slowing. Memories flooded his mind, not as distractions but as anchors. He remembered a younger version of himself lying in mud and ash, waiting hours for a single shot. He remembered learning to read the world as others read books, understanding distance through shadows, wind through the feel of it on his skin. The laughter of the snipers echoed faintly in his ears, blending with older sounds, with voices long gone. The general shifted his weight slightly, impatience creeping in, and opened his mouth to speak again, to end this spectacle. That was when the old man exhaled. It was a slow, controlled breath, the kind taught by no manual but learned through survival. His finger tightened on the trigger, not with force, but with certainty. The rifle cracked, the sound sharp and startling, echoing across the valley. Some of the soldiers flinched despite themselves, more from surprise than fear. The general frowned, already preparing to dismiss the shot as meaningless. 2 miles away, beyond the limits of what any of them considered possible, something changed. It was not immediate, not dramatic in the way explosions are dramatic, but precise, exact. A distant figure collapsed, unseen by the naked eye, the impact registering only on instruments and delayed reports. The snipers checked their scopes, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion. One of them muttered that something was wrong, that sensors were lighting up in ways they should not. The general's confidence wavered for the first time, a small crack in an otherwise flawless surface. He demanded confirmation, his voice sharper now, edged with something unfamiliar. The old man lowered the rifle and rested it against his shoulder, his breathing steady, his face calm. He did not look triumphant. He did not look relieved. He looked tired, as though completing a task long overdue. A radio crackled somewhere behind the line, voices urgent and overlapping. Coordinates were shouted, distances recalculated, impossible numbers repeated, as if saying them enough times would make them make sense. One of the snipers slowly lowered his rifle, eyes wide, staring at the old man as if seeing him for the first time. The general turned fully now, his posture stiff, his mind racing through possibilities he had never considered. He asked the old man how he had done it, demanded an explanation, a trick, some hidden technology. The old man shook his head gently. He said there was no trick, only patience, only listening to the world instead of trying to dominate it. The wind picked up again, sweeping snow across the ground, and for a brief moment, the scene felt suspended between past and present. The general felt something cold settle in his chest, not the cold of the weather, but the cold of realization. He had believed power came from rank, from equipment, from the confidence of numbers. He was beginning to understand how fragile that belief was. The old man met his gaze, eyes clear, unafraid, and in them the general saw not arrogance, but a quiet warning. Around them, the soldiers stood frozen, unsure how to react, their training offering no guidance for what they had just witnessed. The laughter from moments before felt distant, embarrassing, like a memory from another lifetime. The old man adjusted the sling on his rifle and took a small step back, as if preparing to leave, as if his role in this moment was finished. The general opened his mouth again, but no words came. Somewhere far away, alarms continued to sound, systems recalibrated, and a carefully constructed sense of control unraveled thread by thread. The old man turned slightly, snow crunching beneath his boots, and for a second the general considered ordering him stopped, detained, questioned further. But something held him back, something like respect mixed with fear. The old man had shown them all that the distance between arrogance and silence was sometimes no more than a single, perfectly placed shot, and as he walked away, the valley seemed larger, emptier, and far more dangerous than it had only minutes before. The silence that followed was heavier than the snowfall, pressing down on every man standing in that frozen valley. Radios crackled again, louder now, panic bleeding through disciplined voices that had never known doubt. Reports confirmed what instruments insisted on repeating, a confirmed kill at a distance that rewrote the rules they lived by. The general stood rigid, his salute forgotten, his authority suddenly feeling ceremonial rather than absolute. He watched the old man's back as he walked a few steps away, the worn coat swaying gently with each movement, and for the first time in decades the general felt small. He ordered the perimeter secured, his voice steady by habit alone. And soldiers moved automatically, though their eyes kept drifting toward the old man as if he were an unexploded device that might detonate without warning. The snipers gathered close, whispering in urgent tones, replaying data, adjusting scopes, searching for an explanation that fit within the world they understood. None of their calculations made sense. Wind speed, bullet drop, temperature, curvature of the earth, all the variables they mastered with pride refused to align. One of them finally said what they were all thinking, that the shot should not have been possible, not with that rifle, not by anyone. The general heard this and felt a sharp sting of irritation, not at the snipers, but at himself. He had built his career on certainty, on systems that promised dominance through precision and control. And now an old man with a relic had shattered that promise in a single moment. He called the old man back, his tone no longer dismissive but cautious, almost respectful. The old man turned slowly, meeting the general's eyes without hesitation. Up close, the general could see the deep lines etched into the man's face, not just from age but from exposure, hardship, and choices made under pressure. He asked again where the old man had learned to shoot like that, demanded a history, a record, something he could file and understand. The old man shrugged slightly and said he had learned wherever survival demanded it. On mountains where the air was thin and unforgiving, in deserts where mirages lied, in cities reduced to rubble where a missed shot meant death. His words were simple, almost plain, but they carried weight. The general gestured toward the rifle, asking why he still used something so outdated when modern weapons existed. The old man replied that newer tools were faster, cleaner, but they taught people to trust machines more than themselves, and machines failed in ways men forgot how to adapt to. Some of the soldiers shifted uncomfortably, hearing an implied criticism they did not want to accept. The wind picked up again, carrying fine ice crystals that stung exposed skin, and the old man pulled his coat tighter around him. The general offered him warmth, shelter, food, anything he wanted, his voice betraying a desire to regain control through generosity. The old man looked around at the soldiers, at the line of rifles, at the general's polished boots standing on frozen ground, and said he wanted nothing from them. He said he had come only because arrogance had a way of spreading until someone stopped it. The word hung in the air, sharp and accusing, and several soldiers glanced instinctively at the general. His jaw tightened, but he did not react. Instead, he asked what would have happened if the shot had missed. The old man answered honestly that then he would have died, and that would have been fair. War, he said, did not care about intentions, only outcomes. That answer unsettled the general more than any accusation could have. He had spent years ensuring that risk was always managed, calculated, minimized for himself, even as he ordered others into danger. The old man's acceptance of consequence without expectation of reward or survival was foreign to him. A message came through confirming the identity of the distant casualty, a high-value target whose death would alter the balance of power in the region. The general felt a surge of strategic satisfaction mixed with unease, knowing this victory had not come from his plans. He ordered the soldiers to stand down slightly, weapons lowered but ready, and turned his attention fully to the old man. He asked what he intended to do now. The old man said he would leave, because staying would only invite questions that did not need answers. The general hesitated, torn between detaining him as an asset and letting him go as a force beyond command. Around them, the snipers watched silently, their confidence cracked, their pride wounded. One of them stepped forward and asked, almost quietly, how the old man accounted for the bullet's path over such distance. The old man looked at him for a long moment and then said that bullets did not travel in straight lines because the world was not straight, and anyone who believed otherwise was lying to themselves. He explained that understanding a shot like that required knowing not just physics but time, how long the bullet would exist in the air, and what the world would do to it during that time. The sniper nodded slowly, humbled, realizing that years of training had been focused on shortening time rather than mastering it. The general felt a flicker of anger at the institutions that had promised him supremacy through technology alone. He dismissed the soldiers to their positions, leaving himself and the old man standing apart. He asked one final question, his voice low, asking who the old man had been fighting for all these years. The old man considered this, and then said he had never fought for flags or titles, only for the chance to end fights before they consumed more lives. The answer landed heavily, forcing the general to confront the gap between rhetoric and reality. Snow began to fall more heavily now, softening the outlines of men and weapons, muting the world. The old man turned to leave again, and this time the general did not stop him. As he walked away, a young soldier broke formation and watched him go, eyes wide with something like awe. The general noticed this and felt a pang of something he had not felt in years, the fear of losing not a battle but a narrative. He knew that what had happened here would spread through ranks and bases, whispered stories of an impossible shot, of an old man who defied modern doctrine. He also knew that such stories could undermine authority as easily as they inspired respect. As the old man's figure grew smaller against the white landscape, the general wondered whether true power lay not in commanding others, but in knowing when not to command at all. He ordered the camp to prepare for relocation, his voice firm but thoughtful, and as soldiers moved, their actions carried a new hesitance. Somewhere deep inside, the general understood that the balance had shifted, not because an enemy had been silenced, but because his own certainty had been. The valley no longer felt like a place of control, but a reminder that history, skill, and humility could converge in unexpected ways, and that arrogance, once challenged, never returned quite the same. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, the valley no longer belonged to the general or his army, but to the story that had begun to take shape in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the impossible. Snow continued to fall, covering footprints, softening the ground where certainty had once stood firm. The old man was gone now, swallowed by distance and weather, leaving behind nothing but questions and a silence that refused to fade. The general spent the night awake in his command tent, staring at maps that suddenly felt dishonest. Lines, symbols, and projections that once gave him comfort now looked like guesses dressed up as truth. Reports continued to arrive confirming the strategic impact of the shot. Alliances shifting, enemy movements stalling, commanders elsewhere scrambling to respond to a loss they could not explain. On paper, it was a victory, perhaps even a decisive one, yet the general felt no satisfaction. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the old man's steady hands and calm expression, the absence of pride in his demeanor. He realized that the shot had not merely killed a target, but had exposed a flaw in the way power was understood and taught. Training protocols, something he had never done so personally before. The snipers were called in one by one, questioned not about their performance, but about their assumptions. Many struggled to answer, unused to examining the beliefs beneath their skills. Some spoke defensively, others with honesty that surprised even themselves. One admitted that he had begun to rely so heavily on equipment that he no longer trusted his instincts. Another confessed that he had never taken a shot without digital confirmation, never truly feeling the moment pass through him. The general listened without judgment, absorbing the quiet crisis unfolding within his elite unit. Word of the old man spread beyond the valley, carried by soldiers, by intercepted communications, by rumors that grew larger with each retelling. Some said the rifle had been enchanted. Others claimed the old man was a ghost from a forgotten war, sent to correct the course of the present. The general knew better. He knew that myths were born when reality became uncomfortable. He addressed his officers that afternoon, not with threats or orders but with a story, recounting the moment without embellishment, without trying to reclaim authority through bravado. He spoke of arrogance as a weakness, of overconfidence as an enemy more dangerous than any opposing force. Some listened with respect, others with skepticism, but all listened, because the general's tone carried something new, a humility they had never heard from him before. Meanwhile, far from the camp, the old man moved slowly through the snow-covered landscape, each step measured, conserving energy as he always had. He did not look back. He had learned long ago that looking back invited regret, and regret clouded judgment. His thoughts were not on the general or the soldiers, but on the many faces he had seen over the years, comrades lost, enemies spared, moments where a single decision had changed everything. He wondered if this shot would truly end anything, or if it would simply become another spark in an endless cycle. He accepted that he would never know. That had always been the price of acting decisively. As night fell again, the general received intelligence that enemy forces were withdrawing from key positions, their morale shaken. Analysts credited the long-range kill, calling it a psychological blow. The general understood this better than they did. He knew that fear was not rooted in the death itself, but in the realization that limits could be broken by someone they could not predict or control. He thought of the old man's words about listening to the world instead of dominating it, and for the first time he questioned how many conflicts had been prolonged because leaders refused to listen. Days passed, and the army moved on, leaving the valley behind, but the impact lingered. Training sessions changed, instructors encouraging soldiers to understand fundamentals without technology, to feel wind and distance rather than rely solely on readouts. Some resisted, calling it regression, but others embraced it, finding a deeper connection to their craft. The general faced resistance from higher command as well. Questions about why he allowed an unknown civilian to walk away, why he did not secure the asset. He answered truthfully that some forces could not be owned without being diminished. His superiors did not like the answer, but results spoke loudly enough to quiet them for now. Somewhere along a frozen road, the old man stopped at a small fire he had built and warmed his hands, the rifle resting beside him. He examined it briefly, running his fingers along the worn stock, and felt a familiar mix of gratitude and sorrow. He knew that stories for a mirror, adjusting his uniform, noticing how the decorations felt heavier than before. He wondered which of them truly represented service and which represented ambition. The question unsettled him, but he did not turn away from it. He began writing a report, not just of events but of lessons, careful with his words, knowing they would be scrutinized. He chose honesty anyway. As weeks turned into months, the conflict shifted, de-escalated in places, flared in others, but something fundamental had changed within the general. He found himself questioning orders, asking why more often than how. Some saw this as weakness, others as growth. He did not care which. On a quiet evening, long after the valley had faded into memory for most, the general stepped outside alone and looked at the sky, vast and indifferent. At first light, he ordered a review of he thought of the distance between himself and the old man, not in miles but in understanding. He realized that true authority was not proven by silencing others, but by knowing when silence itself was enough. Far away, the old man continued on his path, blending into towns and wilderness, unseen, unrecognized. He carried no medals, no proof of what he had done, only the knowledge that sometimes one precise action could speak louder than armies. He did not seek redemption or recognition. He sought balance, however fleeting it might be. And somewhere between them, between rank and experience, between modern power and ancient patience, the echo of that 2-mile shot lingered, a reminder that arrogance, when confronted by quiet mastery, had no defense at all.